Good evening. Welcome at the French Institute. My name is Mathias Rambaud and I run the book department here. We are delighted to host you today for the book launch of the last one, the English translation of Fatima Daas' debut novel, which was awarded the Prix Les Inrockuptibles in its original French version and which is now available to the British audience thanks to Lara Verneux's translation and Hope Road's publication. We are thrilled to have Fatima with us here tonight. This is our first post-COVID writers' tour in the UK, and I must say that we are very relieved to see that such things are still possible to put up. Fatima's just arrived to London, not from France though, but from Glasgow, where she met her Scottish readers yesterday, and before that she was in Edinburgh for another event at the French Institute, and even before she was in Valladolid in a Spanish university, so obviously artist mobility is back on tracks. Fatima was born in 1995 and grew up in a Parisian banlieue of Clichy-sous-Bois, where her parents settled after arriving from Algeria. In high school, Fatima participated in writing workshops led by Tanguy Viel, and Fatima will be in conversation with Diyora Shadijanova, who is a journalist and the first-person editor at the online magazine gal-dem. So please give them a warm welcome. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that Juliette will help with the translation into English.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm very, very excited to have you all here and talk about this wonderful book. There are some really amazing themes in here that I'd like to discuss. Fatima, how are you today?
Je vais passer au français.
I'm going to carry on in French, and in my case in English.
Ça va, je vais bien. Merci beaucoup.
I'm well, thank you very much.
Amazing. Well, welcome to London. So, for those who don't know much about you, when did you first become interested in writing?
Quand est-ce que tu as commencé à être intéressée, avoir envie d'écrire?
On commence fort.
Strong start.
J'ai commencé à écrire quand j'étais adolescente.
I started writing when I was a teenager.
Vers l'âge de 12-13 ans.
When I was about 12, 13 years old.
À cet âge-là, j'arrivais pas à m'exprimer, à parler avec les autres.
When I was that age, I wasn't able to speak with others. I couldn't express myself.
Donc je pense que j'ai cherché un moyen d'expression et c'est passé donc par l'écriture d'abord.
And I think I was searching for a way of expressing myself, and it came through writing.
And what sorts of things were you writing about when you were younger?
J'écrivais plutôt de la fiction.
I wrote fiction mainly.
Parce que à cet âge-là, je pense que j'avais encore du mal à être proche de qui j'étais. Et petit à petit, j'ai commencé à tenir des journaux où j'essayais de comprendre un peu le monde.
Because at that age, when I was so young, initially I found it hard to be close to myself and true to myself. And then little by little, I started writing diaries and opening up that way to the world, understanding the world better.
Et j'ai compris aussi petit à petit, du coup, en écrivant de la fiction, que c'était une manière pour moi de me rapprocher de moi-même, en fait, de manière détournée. Mais c'était de cette manière-là que j'arrivais à parler de moi.
And I realized and I understood that it was through fiction, even if it was a sort of roundabout way, it was a way to express myself and talk about things that were close to me.
That's really wonderful, thank you. And you grew up in Clichy-sous-Bois, where your parents settled after arriving from Algeria. What was that like?
C'était très différent de là où je suis née, à savoir Saint-Germain-en-Laye.
It was very different to the place where I was born, which was Saint-Germain-en-Laye.
Qui est une ville en fait très riche, très bourgeoise.
which is a very rich town, very bourgeois.
Et Clichy-sous-Bois, du coup, c'était vraiment tout le contraire.
And Clichy-sous-Bois was the total opposite.
Donc il y avait ça, il y avait quelque chose d'assez brutal d'un coup. En même temps, je suis arrivée assez tôt à Clichy-sous-Bois à l'âge de 5 ans.
So there was this very brutal change in a way, but at the same time I was very young because I arrived there when I was 5.
Mais ce que je retiens surtout de cette ville-là, c'est la chaleur, l'entraide, la solidarité.
But what I really retain from that experience is really the warmth, the helping of each other, the community, solidarity.
Et oui, l'entraide, le fait que dès qu'on a besoin de quelque chose, on puisse appeler n'importe qui sera là à tout moment, en fait.
And the people helping out each other, the fact that as soon as you need something, you know, somebody will be there at any time to help out.
Et j'ai vraiment grandi aussi dans une ville où les gens sont complètement différents, qui viennent de plein d'endroits différents, de plein de pays différents. Donc il y a quelque chose de... Ce multiculturalisme était très fort. Et du coup, ça renforçait aussi cette chaleur, des univers de partout.
And also growing up there was a place with many people from many different places in the world, a real multiculturalism. And so that reinforced the support and that kind of community coming together, the different people supporting each other, and the warmth.
Et je terminerai par le rire. C'est les personnes qui vivent avec Clichy-sous-Bois, j'ai l'impression qu'on rigole beaucoup et il y a un humour très important qui m'a aidé, qui m'a sauvé.
And then I'd add and finish with saying laughter is what I remember most, and that's something very important because laughter was there and saved me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's really lovely. And do you think, growing up within this community helped you find your voice as a writer?
C'est une bonne question. Je pense que oui, d'une certaine manière. Je pense que c'est ce qui m'a fait en tout cas aller au plus proche de moi-même pour trouver une voie dans l'écriture. Et je pense que je suis influencée par l'endroit où j'ai grandi, par les personnes que j'ai rencontrées, avec qui j'ai discuté, j'ai échangé, j'ai ri.
And it's a good question. I'm definitely influenced, I think, by the whole environment, and it's the place that carried me and influenced me in terms of the way people talked and laughed and supported me.
That's really lovely. Thank you. And so the last one, which congratulations, it's really incredible, and hopefully people in the audience have had a chance to read. The last one has been described as an autobiographical debut novel. What has the experience of writing a novel but through your own experiences been like? You know, did you find yourself looking at yourself almost as a character? Did you have to take a step back when looking at your story, when writing the story?
Normalement, j'ai tout compris. Et je suis pas sûre, mais je vais essayer de répondre. Si je suis à côté de la plaque, vous me le dites.
So she'll try and answer immediately. She thinks she's got it, but just in case, we will say.
Yeah.
Ce roman, j'ai commencé à l'écrire en essayant de retranscrire en quelque sorte mon parcours, donc en partant de mon histoire.
So I wrote this novel trying in a certain way to retranscribe my journey, so as a starting point using my own story.
Mais très vite, j'ai eu envie de faire autre chose que simplement raconter la vérité de ma vie.
But very quickly I wanted to do something else than just tell the truth of my own life.
Et c'est à ce moment-là que j'ai voulu transformer du coup tout ce que j'avais commencé à mettre dans ce texte, à savoir des éléments qui pouvaient être autobiographiques, en essayant de faire entrer de la fiction, de transformer le réel et d'avoir la possibilité d'utiliser de la fiction pour aller plus loin et pour être aussi plus libre dans ce que j'avais envie de raconter.
And that's when I started changing things and transforming elements of my narration and to go more into fiction, to give myself a freedom in a way, to be freer to tell what I wanted to tell.
Mm-hmm. J'ai répondu à la question?
Was that answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because I was wondering how much of it was, your experience, but how much of it also was kind of, I guess, narrativized and fictionalized for effect.
Après, je pense qu'il y a quelque chose de l'ordre des émotions qui est très, très très sincère et très vrai au niveau de l'autrice et du personnage, du coup.
So I think there's something very sincere with regards to the emotion for the author and the narrator.
And how does it feel to have written about some of the rawest parts of your, life experience?
Some of the worst parts.
Rawest.
Comment ça fait d'écrire? Qu'est-ce que tu ressens? Des choses qui sont tellement crues dans le sens du bien, vraiment à nu.
Alors en écrivant, c'est vertigineux déjà. C'est difficile de réussir à le faire, de réussir à retranscrire ce qu'on a pu ressentir ou ce qu'on ressent au moment où on l'écrit.
So it's already very hard in terms of writing it to try and to manage to succeed in doing that, to express what we actually felt and were feeling at the time in writing, to transcribe it as sincerely.
Et trouver les mots justes aussi pour décrire ce qu'on ressent, ça c'est compliqué.
Finding the right words, the appropriate words to express what we feel is quite complicated.
Et puis après, dans un second temps, c'est le fait de partager cette expérience-là avec les autres et de publier ce roman. C'est encore une autre étape et c'est encore...
And then another stage, which is the fact that you then share it with people and it gets published. That's just a whole other stage.
Il y a le fait de se retrouver avec soi-même en fait et d'exprimer ça. Et c'est une histoire que j'ai gardée en moi pendant longtemps. Et le fait de l'écrire déjà, c'était comme une révélation à moi-même.
And then to find yourself again, and it's quite a revelation to yourself in a way. Because I lived with that story for a long time.
Puis une révélation aux autres.
And then
Ensuite.
a revelation to others after that.
Well, in the book, you also say that you go to a therapist or a psychologist, as this translated in the book. Did you find this writing experience also therapeutic in some sense?
Je dirais non dans la mesure où j'ai pas l'impression que ça a résolu des problèmes.
So I'd say no in the sense that I don't really think it solved problems.
Mais en même temps, il y a quelque chose quand même de l'ordre de... Je sais pas comment dire, mais en tout cas, il y a quelque chose qui... Oui, ça me libère quelque part.
But then at the same time, there is something, it's hard to say, something that I feel freer. It's freeing.
Yeah, that's really lovely. So you start the book with... My name is Fatima, the name of a symbolic figure in Islam, a name that must be honoured, a name that mustn't be soiled, as we say in my house. Immediately I knew that shame and the idea of dishonour would be an underlying theme in the story. How important do you think it is to unpick these concepts, especially for queer Muslims worldwide?
Pour moi, c'était très important justement de parler d'un personnage qui se sent à côté.
For me, it was very important to speak about a character who feels an outsider.
À côté, à la fois par rapport à la religion, mais pas que.
Outside of religion, but not just that.
Qui a honte.
And who's ashamed.
Qui essaie de rejoindre les deux bouts, à savoir à la fois d'accepter son homosexualité et garder sa foi.
To try and put the two together, which is keep their faith and accept their homosexuality.
Parce que c'est quelque chose dont j'ai manqué en fait, dont j'ai manqué quand j'étais adolescente et dont j'ai manqué pendant longtemps.
Because it's something that I was missing when I was a teenager and I was missing for a long time.
Et je pense que quelque part, avant d'écrire cette histoire, j'avais l'impression qu'il fallait faire un choix et renoncer forcément à une part de moi-même.
And before writing this story, I had the impression that one had to make a choice and renounce one part of yourself.
Et d'où l'importance pour moi d'écrire un personnage complexe qui refuse d'être seulement là où on l'attend.
So hence the importance for me to write a complex character who refuses to just be where people expect them to be.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think one thing that really kind of touched me was when the character or you go to the mosque and essentially in search for answers, and being told that, unless it's homosexuality is something that shouldn't be acted upon. How did that make you feel when, that experience, but also like writing about that, that pivotal moment where you felt like you had to make that choice, and how do you think, looking back on it, do you think that that's a choice that doesn't have to be made? Hopefully.
Quand j'y repense, je me dis qu'il y a un parcours que j'ai un peu dépassé.
When I think about it again, I think there is a journey that I've kind of gone beyond.
Dans le sens où aujourd'hui j'ai l'impression de vivre ma foi de manière plus apaisée et de manière plus solitaire aussi, et ça me va très bien.
And I think I've had the impression now that I live my faith in a calmer, solitary way, and it's something I like, I want, so that's good.
Et puis je pense que j'avais besoin d'écrire ce personnage-là, j'avais besoin de le faire exister en France, en fait, dans la littérature française aussi, et de ne pas avoir honte de parler de la culpabilité, et de ne pas avoir honte de parler de ces sentiments très très forts qui nous parcourent à un moment donné, quoi.
And I think I had a need to make this character speak, to give her a voice specifically in France, and to not feel shame for those contradictions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I imagined kind of reading that, someone who might be younger reading that and kind of finding themselves in that journey and potentially taking the same journey of going to a religious institution to ask for answers and being met with something they don't want to hear. But I think it's important to have a character who does transcend beyond that, because, it shows that there is life beyond these binaries of what we think we can be.
Complètement, je pense que
Completely.
c'est difficile d'ajouter quelque chose à ce que tu viens de dire.
It's hard to add something to what you just said.
Well, one thing also I was thinking about is, the history of queer Muslims is something that has been unfortunately historically erased. That's something I've found in my search for stories of queer Muslims. And yeah, how important do you think it is to have these stories out there? For there are over 1 billion Muslims in the world, and surely some of them are queer. So how do you, what do you think is the importance of archiving these stories, whether they are fictional or non-fiction?
Je pense que c'est extrêmement important. Je pense que c'est ce que je disais tout à l'heure, c'est ce qui m'a manqué, moi.
I think it's extremely important. That's what I was saying earlier on. That's what was lacking in my experience of growing up.
Et c'est très difficile, je pense, de grandir dans un pays où on est vu nulle part, où on est complètement invisible, où on se reconnaît dans aucun personnage à la télé.
And it's very difficult to grow up in a country where you're not visible at all. You're not represented. You don't see yourself on TV or anywhere.
Et je pense que il y a quelque chose qui se passe quand même en France où on commence à raconter nos histoires et on commence à faire entrer des questions qu'on n'avait pas envie d'aborder en France jusque-là.
And I think something is beginning to happen in France, and we're beginning to hear these stories and approach questions that we didn't feel like approaching before.
Et je pense que c'est ces histoires-là qui nous font tenir, en fait.
And those are the stories that hold us, that make us exist.
Qui nous font nous sentir moins seuls, en tout cas.
And that make us cope and feel less alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, I must say, I of course agree. And I think for queer Muslims, it's a very difficult place to be in, because you have perhaps Islamophobes who kind of weaponize the fact that in lots of Muslim communities there is lots of homophobia. But then equally you also have Islamophobia within some, queer spaces as well. So I think it's being stuck in that rock and a hard place, and actually seeing that the visibility is so important is what I'm saying. And I think it's very hard being a visible, queer Muslim.
Complètement, et c'est quelque chose que j'ai expérimenté à la sortie du roman.
Completely, and it's something that I've experienced when the novel came out, was published.
Oui, tout d'un coup, voilà, à la fois il y avait le bon côté de l'histoire, dans le sens où il y avait des personnes qui ont lu mon roman et qui se sont senties représentées ou qui se sont senties très proches du personnage de Fatima.
There was the good side of the story where people connected with the story and connected with Fatima and felt themselves represented and could relate to the character.
Des personnes qui m'ont dit qu'ils avaient l'impression que je racontais leur histoire.
And some people told me they felt that Fatima was telling their own story.
Et l'autre côté, c'est le côté où ça chamboule un petit peu de parler d'homosexualité et d'islam, mais d'islam en France, d'en parler de cette manière-là, il y avait tout de suite, c'était très difficile pour moi d'être à la bonne place.
And then there's the other side where it's very difficult and people are unsettled by the whole discourse of Islam and homosexuality, and it was very difficult for me suddenly to be in the right position.
Et on me mettait jamais à la bonne place, et quand je dis bonne place, c'est la place juste d'autrice.
And I was never put in the right place, the right position, and when I mean the right position, I mean as the author.
On m'a souvent invitée pour me faire parler de l'islam et de l'homosexualité sans jamais réellement aborder mon roman de manière globale, dans son entièreté, quoi.
I was often invited and made to speak about Islam and homosexuality and not my novel in a global way, the work, my writing.
Donc je n'étais plus du tout autrice, j'étais théologienne, sociologue.
So I was no longer author, I was a theologist, scholar, sociologist.
I think I'm not surprised that happened. I think there are lots of reasons for that, because firstly it's a contentious topic, and definitely here you might have been invited on BBC Question Time and it will be a horrendous experience, but I think also because there are so few voices, people will probably see you as an expert when really you just want to tell your story. So it sounds like that is a lot of weight to put on someone.
Exactement, mais je pense encore une fois qu'on donne une responsabilité à certaines autrices en fait que d'autres auteurs n'ont pas.
Exactly, and I think that there's actually the fact that they give a responsibility, or one gives a responsibility to authors that others don't have, certain authors.
Tout d'un coup, moi, j'étais la personne qui représentait toutes les lesbiennes musulmanes issues de l'immigration de banlieue.
Suddenly I was the Muslim lesbian from the banlieue, originally from Algeria, who would represent immigrant, I would be the only one who would represent them all.
Donc chaque mot que j'utilisais, si c'était maladroit, si c'était peu importe comment on l'interprétait, ça tout de suite j'avais une responsabilité énorme. Et c'est vrai que le poids de la visibilité, ça peut être très difficile, surtout pour un premier roman, surtout à 23 ans.
And every word would have a weight, an awkwardness in it, and whatever I said, it would be interpreted in a certain way, and that weight of responsibility, and well, it was very heavy to bear, especially for a first novel, and at age 23 then.
Et je pense que ce qui m'a le plus choquée pendant les interviews que j'ai pu avoir, c'était à la radio où on m'a dit mais c'est pas trop dur d'être musulmane, ne voulez pas faire un choix et être juste lesbienne, et j'étais complètement j'ai demandé à la personne si ça le dérangeait en fait.
And then I think what was the most shocking that I had was when I was doing radio, when people asked me, but isn't it too difficult to be Muslim and lesbian? Can you not choose?
Wow. I'm so sorry that happened. Gosh, well, hopefully you don't feel like that here, and we can talk. I want to talk to you more about the book as well. So some of the themes I'm really interested in. Firstly, I really liked how there seemed to be like a reoccurrence of the public transport in the story, and I was just wondering, what was that meant to signify? Was it kind of, for me, when I was reading it, I felt like being in the public transport with you, it felt like this is just a story of someone's day-to-day life. Public transport is just like your life, amongst all these other people who are around you, and they're living their life, and it made me feel very transported to that place. But what was the significance of the public transport as a theme?
Il y a exactement ça. Il y a le quotidien du personnage déjà que j'avais envie d'explorer, et le regard du personnage sur le monde.
So it's exactly that. There was the daily life of the character and the character's outlook, their gaze on the world outside.
Et en même temps, j'avais envie de parler de ce que c'est que de vivre en banlieue.
And also I wanted to talk about what it's like to live in the banlieue, in the outskirts.
Et donc de devoir faire des heures de transport, à savoir donc 3 heures par jour aller-retour pour aller à l'université.
And then having to travel those long hours, commuting 3 hours to go to university.
Pour rejoindre Paris, pour rejoindre le centre.
To get to the center of Paris.
Et il y a quelque chose aussi dans les transports qui montre un peu la circulation du personnage. Comment dire, c'est un personnage qui est tout le temps en mouvement, et j'ai la sensation que les transports apportent ça aussi, cette façon dont le personnage est tout le temps en mouvement.
And if you think of circulation and traffic, there's something that represents also the character's movement. She's always in movement, and so that represents also the traveling, her own character in movement.
Yeah, no, I really related to that, kind of also growing up in sort of the outskirts of London and getting to school. I had to take 2 buses and a train every morning, and so I felt like I was there with you. And often it's when we are in transit that we kind of process a lot of things that are going on in our life, and yeah, that's kind of what I got from that. So another thing I thought was really important in the book was kind of touching on domestic abuse, and how that can also, influence the way we see ourselves and our identity. How did you find writing about domestic abuse within the book?
Je pense que c'est parti de l'envie de parler de ce qui fait mal, de ce qui fait aussi du bien par ailleurs, mais de ce qui peut nous faire du mal et nous rendre très silencieux.
I think it started with the want to talk about what can hurt, what can be good as well, but what can hurt and damage us and make us silent.
Par exemple, le personnage de Fatima, c'est plutôt quelqu'un qui regarde la violence plutôt que de la subir. Par exemple, les moments de violence dont fait preuve le père.
So, for example, the character Fatima is somebody who witnesses violence rather than is subject to it herself. For example, the moments of violence with her father.
Elle est plus observatrice donc de cette violence, et qu'est-ce que ça fait donc pour. J'avais envie d'explorer décrire la sensation que ça fait d'être témoin de violence à l'intérieur d'une fratrie.
And because she's more of an observer, I wanted to describe, to get a feeling of what it's like to be a witness to this violence within the sibling relationships.
And I also found it interesting that almost every chapter started with, my name is Fatima. What was the intention behind that? Was it kind of just reaffirming who you are and reaffirming that this is your story? Or I found that really fascinating.
C'est ouais. Je pense que ce que j'ai essayé de faire, c'est à la fois de re-questionner les assignations.
One thing I tried to do is to re-question the assignations.
de briser un peu ces normes, ces codes-là.
To break those norms, the codes
Et de
imposed.
faire en sorte de faire exister un personnage qui est absent dans les représentations, donc comme on le disait.
And to give an existence to a character who is absent in the representations generally.
Donc un personnage qu'on n'arrive pas à attraper, un personnage qui est en mouvement et qu'on n'arrive pas à simplement finalement mettre dans une seule case.
So a character that you can't just catch and put in a box, that's quite elusive and moving all the time.
Je trouvais ça amusant à la fois aussi dans l'écriture, en dehors de l'envie de revendiquer ou de faire exister ce personnage-là.
And I thought it was fun as well. It was amusing to do, rather than, or as well as just vindicating what it's about, but to play with that repetition.
It's lovely. And another theme that I really enjoyed was actually friendship and, you know, the strength and importance of friendship. You know, do you think that's something that has also been really affirming to understanding your identity, to understanding your sexuality? And how important is it for us to also talk about the joys of friendship in these stories?
Déjà, merci de parler de l'amitié, parce qu'on n'en a pas beaucoup parlé en France.
So first of all, thank you to talk about friendships, because I haven't been spoken to about friendship a lot in France. So
Ça me fait plaisir de pouvoir en parler.
I'm glad to be able to talk about it.
Du coup, j'ai oublié la question, c'était à quel point l'amitié, ça peut aider. Ouais, je pense que c'est très central en fait dans mon roman, c'est pour ça que j'ai dit ça.
I think it's very central to my novel.
Le personnage de Rokia est très important dans le roman.
The character of Rokia is very important.
C'est quelqu'un avec qui elle n'a pas besoin de tout expliquer, justement.
She's somebody with whom she doesn't have to explain everything.
Le silence suffit, ou le premier mot qu'elle peut dire, Fatima, Rokia l'attrape et comprend.
Silence is enough, or even just the first word that Fatima can express, Rokia grabs it and understands.
Elle comprend ses intentions, elle comprend ce qu'elle a envie et ce qu'elle n'a pas envie du tout d'aborder, ou ce qu'elle n'arrive pas à dire aussi.
She understands her intentions, or perhaps what she can't express. She gets it.
Et plus personnellement, je dirais aussi la même chose, c'est-à-dire que l'amitié, moi, c'est quelque chose qui m'a sauvée, qui m'a fait résister.
And from a personal point of view, I would say that friendship is what has saved me and made me resist.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when you grow up with maybe difficulties within family, it's seeing that family exists beyond, you know, just your household. And I think it was really lovely, you know, seeing characters who, I'm assuming that Rokia was also Muslim as a character.
Je crois que je le dis pas dans le roman.
I don't think I say so in the novel.
Okay. I think maybe because of the name, I'd had assumed, but it was just really nice, you know, to have that. Yeah, maybe I'd projected maybe my expectations, but it was really nice to have that character there who is Muslim in my head, and didn't even question, you know, make Fatima feel uncomfortable, and just be validating. And thank you for writing that character.
Merci beaucoup. Non, complètement. Et tu parlais de l'entretien sur la BBC au début, et c'est vrai qu'il y a ma meilleure amie qui en parle et qui dit justement aussi qu'elle est musulmane, et qui parle de la première fois dont je lui ai parlé de...
You were talking earlier on about the BBC interview system, and my best friend talks about it and says similar things, and she's Muslim.
Sorry, can you explain in terms of the...
Oui, dans l'interview, justement, elle se rappelait de la première fois où je lui avais annoncé que j'étais lesbienne, et de sa réaction après ça.
In the interview, she talks about, she remembered the first time that I told her I was a lesbian, and she remembered her reaction to that.
So one thing I also was wondering was, again, the relationship of Fatima to, I guess, her parents in the novel, and I think, I don't know if you've heard actually of, the book has completely, the name has completely evaporated from my head. I'll have to try and remember, but there was a book I read last year it was a memoir about a gay Muslim man who's Pakistani and grew up in the UK. It was called A Dutiful Boy. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a really fantastic read. And I remember one of the things I picked out in his story was the relationship with the parents and how scary that can be if you are Muslim and you want to come out, because there is a real chance that you might be excommunicated. Not just, of course, this isn't just in Muslim households. This can, happen in any household, religious or not. But I think what was really important as well was to see the development of the relationship with the mother, and to see that it doesn't just stop. This can't be, this can't be, and we don't have a relationship. It was so important to see that time is something that is really healing and everyone is on their journey. And just wanted to say that, but also ask, how important was that for you to show that a relationship is something that continues, with parents.
Non, mais je pense que tu as tout dit là. Je pense qu'il y a vraiment une évolution et c'est ce que j'ai vraiment essayé de faire par rapport à la mère.
I think you've said it all, but it's really there's an evolution there. This is development, and that's what I tried to do with regards to the mother.
La relation avec le père, c'est quand même autre chose parce qu'il y a pas vraiment de relation, on va dire ça comme ça.
And the relationship with the father is something else, though. We'll say there's not really a relationship. We'll say it that way.
Mais avec la mère, j'ai l'impression qu'on passe des tabous au silence. Moi, je différencie les deux. Le silence, c'est plus quelque chose qui s'installe au fur et à mesure, mais qui n'est pas dérangeant par rapport au tabou.
I think with the mother, we go from taboo to silence. But the silence is not an uncomfortable or difficult, upsetting or disturbing silence. It's a silence in its own right.
Et j'avais pas envie de raconter l'histoire d'un coming out, mais plutôt de parler de ce qui est possible en dehors du coming out.
And I didn't want to write a story about coming out, but more what would be possible outside that aspect of coming out.
Comment un personnage qui est lesbienne et musulmane, qui aime sa mère et que sa mère l'aime, comment elle peut trouver un autre moyen sans le dire de continuer à s'aimer mutuellement et de se faire accepter et que la mère accepte.
So how can a character who is lesbian and Muslim and who loves her mother and her mother loves her can find a way of making herself understood without saying it, coming out and be loved, continue to be loved?
Mais je pense qu'à la fin, il y a vraiment un truc aussi de libération dans le sens où, bien sûr, il n'y a pas de discussion autour de ça, mais il y a quand même une sorte de compréhension mutuelle sans mots.
But I think at the end there is a sort of freeing. There's no confrontation, but there's an understanding, a mutual understanding without words.
La mère comprend. Je crois que la mère comprend, en tout cas, dans ce que j'ai essayé de mettre dans le texte. La mère comprend.
What I tried to put in the text, the mother, I think the mother understands.
Et le personnage de Fatima n'a pas envie d'imposer cette discussion à la mère parce qu'elle sent que, voilà, elle ne lui en parle pas, donc...
And the character of Fatima doesn't want to impose this discussion on her mother because she senses that there would be a distancing.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice to have that almost acceptance from both sides, that's just where it can be left for now, and it doesn't mean it can never be picked up again, but that it's not a now or never situation. A relationship is something that's ongoing, and these things take time, essentially. And especially if you've grown up your whole life being told this is what's right and this is what's wrong. I don't know how old the mother is, but I'm sure it would take years to unlearn some of that, subconscious messaging of compulsory heteronormativity.
Complètement, et puis pas seulement, je pense, par rapport à l'homosexualité. pour tout, ça prend du temps pour que des parents acceptent de lâcher prise sur le fait que leurs enfants ne seront pas exactement ce qu'ils attendent d'eux.
Completely, and I think it doesn't just relate to homosexuality. It takes time for a lot of things, for parents to learn to let go and accept that their children are not what they expect.
Et du temps aussi pour les enfants pour comprendre qu'ils ne seront pas ce que leurs parents veulent qu'ils soient.
And it takes time as well for the children to understand that they won't become what their parents want them to become.
Wow, yeah, that's really powerful. And as you're so right, it's so applicable, not just with sexuality, but also with lots of things that happen in life. One final question I wanted to ask before we soon move on to a Q&A is the importance of writing about the relationships that do take place. You know, I thought that was really nice to talk about the various women that, you know, you end up dating, or that Fatima ends up dating in the book. Yeah, again, how important was it to show that these stories exist and this is what it's like? Because I personally actually haven't ever really come across that kind of, you know, fiction in terms of seeing, you know, queer Muslim women being in love and being in the ups and downs of lust as well.
Qu'est-ce que ça me fait? C'est ça la question. L'importance. Eh ben c'est aussi central d'une certaine manière. C'est aussi central pour moi de parler de la quête amoureuse du personnage de Fatima et de montrer aussi comment ça évolue, c'est-à-dire à partir du moment où elle passe le cap, où elle accepte entre guillemets de son homosexualité et ses relations furtives.
So it's important as well for her, it's central to show how once the character Fatima accepts her sexuality, her homosexuality, and when she goes from the sort of secret, she goes for it, but goes from secret relationships to then openly accepting her sexuality.
Et l'évolution dans l'évolution des relations, ça m'intéresse aussi, c'est de traiter ça, et le moment où elle tombe réellement amoureuse et que finalement ça donne pas lieu à une relation à ce moment-là.
And also the way the relationships evolve, and the fact that as it evolves, it then doesn't turn out to be what one might expect it to be.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, that was really nice that, you know, it's not just like a happily ever after. There's lots of different, you know, experiences, some bad, some good. And I think it was just, for me, it was so important to just read about that, because I think for a lot of, I can't speak for everyone, but from just, you know, some people that I know, I think when you grow up in an environment of fear, of essentially when you're told, well, as long as you don't act upon it, it's okay. You know, like seeing actual relationships, you know, be written about, that was so important to be able to like just confidently sort of read about that and experience that. I think it's just important to be able to, I think when you can't visualize something because you've been told it's wrong, it's important to have that basically. Yeah.
L'importance d'avoir ça quand on a grandi dans la peur et de ne pas avoir quelque chose qui se représente, de pouvoir garder quelque chose dans sa tête, mais en fait de pouvoir le visualiser, de pouvoir lire, ça c'est très important.
Ouais, complètement, mais c'est vrai que moi je dis souvent que cette histoire j'aurais aimé la lire quand j'étais plus petite, parce que si je dis plus jeune.
Completely, and I often say that I would have liked to have had this story to read when I was younger or smaller. I say because I'm still young.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, you know, what do you think a book like this would, how do you think that would have affected, you know, you growing up? Do you think you would have come to maybe some realizations sooner? Yeah.
Ça m'aurait, je pense, oui, je pense que ça aurait changé beaucoup de choses. J'ai du mal à l'imaginer comme
I think it would have changed an awful lot of things, but it's hard for me to imagine that.
Of course, yeah.
Vraiment, j'ai du mal à l'imaginer dans le sens où le sentiment d'avoir grandi seul, très solitaire, c'est difficile d'imaginer autrement cette enfance, cette adolescence.
It's really, truly hard to imagine, and also this sensation, this feeling of having grown up very, very lonely, very alone.
Mais
To imagine another thing is difficult.
par ailleurs, il y a aussi le fait qu'à un moment donné, on a peur de voir des choses où on va se sentir représenté parce que c'est comme si on avait accès d'un coup à une grande famille, et ça aussi, ça peut faire très peur, et c'est aussi ce que j'ai pu expérimenter.
But then it's also something that can bring fear, because you suddenly have access to all these possibilities, and you're part of a great big family. That can be frightening too.
That's really interesting. Well, thank you very much. I do have some more questions, but I was wondering if anyone else had some questions. It's time for Q&A.
Merci beaucoup.
Can speak in French, English, or French, français, anglais. English. Okay. How did your family read your book, and how did your family react to your book?
Ah, ça y est, on y va là.
Oh, here we go.
Première question, ça y est. Bon, moi je vais y aller. Hein.
First question, straight in.
Alors, tout le monde ne l'a pas lu dans ma famille.
So not everybody in my family has read it.
Mes sœurs l'ont lu, 2 de mes sœurs l'ont lu.
2 of my sisters read it.
Et on m'en a parlé de manière très littéraire, en fait. Donc il n'y a pas eu de...
Talk to me about it in a very literary way.
Donc il n'y a pas eu de confrontation par rapport à ce que j'ai pu raconter, est-ce que c'est moi qui suis dans le livre ou d'autres choses.
So there wasn't any form of confrontation in terms of, in relation to what is in the book, and is it really you or what? None of that.
Et ma mère, elle l'a pas lu,
My mother didn't read it.
mais pendant que j'écrivais, je lui lisais des passages.
But when I was writing it, I would read her some passages.
Et certains passages que je choisissais.
There's a certain extracts that I would choose.
Et elle me dit, mais cette histoire, je la connais, c'est bon.
And she was like, yeah, I know that story, it's good. Let's leave it.
I think I saw a hand at the back. Yeah, there we go. Oh, we'll come to you.
Sorry, next time. Bonsoir. De l'origine au prochain roman, vous en écrivez un autre?
So in terms of the next novel, are you writing another one?
That was one of my questions.
Je suis en train de réfléchir et d'écrire le prochain.
I'm currently thinking of it and writing the next one.
Je mets un peu de temps parce que j'essaie de dégager du temps pour vraiment n'avoir que ça à faire aussi.
I'm taking some time because I need to kind of free up some time to really only focus on that.
Oui, du coup, ma question est complètement liée à cette dernière réponse, mais qu'est-ce que la publication a changé pour vous grâce aux éditions Notabilia? Est-ce que maintenant vous vous dédiez complètement à l'écriture ou est-ce que vous jonglez entre plusieurs choses? Voilà.
So the question is linked to that, is how has the publication of this first novel changed you? That's pretty much, is that a good way of making it concise in terms of changed your opportunities?
Je fais que ça. Je peux pour l'instant me permettre de faire que ça parce que ça marche bien.
So right now, currently, I only do that because I'm currently able to do that because it's working well for the moment.
Et ça fait 1 an et demi en fait que je présente mon roman, que j'en parle.
And it's been a year and a half now that I've been presenting my novel and talking about it.
Et avec les traductions, du coup, je fais des tournées, donc ça prend aussi du temps et ça me permet aussi de voir un autre public et de pouvoir échanger.
And then with the translations, it means traveling and meeting new audiences and enables me to talk about the novel with different audiences.
Voilà. Et après, ça a changé beaucoup de choses. Ça a changé mon quotidien, ça a changé
And then, yeah, it changed a lot of things. It changed my daily life.
d'être la visibilité. Enfin, d'être tout d'un coup...
And visibility, to suddenly be.
Having written a story right now about the queer, about the queer experience, do you feel like in your next stories you would want to write about something broader and not kind of feel like you're stuck to one topic, or would you want to continue writing queer stories almost as a way to give people that perspective?
C'est difficile de répondre à cette question.
Hard to answer this question.
Ce que je peux dire, c'est que j'essaie de... Je sais jamais exactement ce que je vais faire plus tard.
What I can say is I never know exactly what I want to do next or later.
J'ai l'impression qu'en tout cas, ce sera toujours relié à ce qui me touche, ce qui me fait mal, ce qui me pose des questions.
I do think, however, that it would always be linked to what touches me, moves me, hurts me, makes me question.
Donc de manière très égoïste, en fait.
In a very selfish way, in a way.
Mais je pense que c'est de cette manière-là que ça concerne les autres, en fait.
But I think it's in that way that it concerns others.
Bonjour, petite question. Ce que je voulais savoir, c'est est-ce que vous avez toujours cherché la publication ? Est-ce qu'au moment de l'écriture, la publication était déjà un projet évident ? Et si oui, est-ce qu'une fois que le livre était écrit, le livre qui est très personnel pour le coup, est-ce qu'il y a eu des doutes, un peu une angoisse de partager tout ça et de le mettre en face du public ?
So while writing, the question is linked to while you were writing, whether you immediately knew you were destined to publish it, you wanted to publish it, and also once it got published, did this bring doubts, potentially having done it?
Je pensais pas tout de suite le publier. Il y avait quand même, j'étais dans un master de création littéraire.
So I didn't think of publishing it immediately. I was doing a master's in creative writing.
Donc il y avait quand même cette démarche de publication prochainement, on va dire ça comme ça.
So let's say there was this the next stage of potential later publication.
Mais quand j'ai terminé mon master, je me disais pas que ça allait venir aussi vite, par exemple.
But when I finished my master's, I didn't realize it was going to come so quick.
Et j'avais envie de prendre du temps, en fait, de relire mon texte, de le laisser reposer, de voir quand est-ce que...
I wanted to take time and have a look at my text, let it sort of macerate a bit, and just let it rest a bit.
Et puis ensuite, quand j'ai rencontré mon éditrice, qui était en fait à ma soutenance de master de création littéraire, c'est allé finalement vite, mais parce que je me suis sentie en confiance avec elle.
And then when I met my publisher, who was present at my thesis supporting my master's, it then happened very quickly.
Et ensuite, à la publication, j'étais quand même très distancée de cette histoire, dans le sens où je sentais pas que j'allais parler de moi. En fait, j'avais toujours une certaine barrière, donc ça me permettait une sorte de protection.
And then with the publication, I was always maintaining a distance. I felt I had a sort of barrier, a sort of protection.
Voilà, je crois.
I was astonished and hugely impressed by your novel. You mentioned that many times you pray, you listen to the Quran. You also read philosophy for 3 years. I'm intrigued to know what your relationship to religious faith is.
Un peu comme dans le roman.
A little bit like in the novel.
J'ai toujours une très grande foi, je crois. Et
I still have great faith, I believe.
Voilà, je dirais ça.
I'd say that.
Merci.
Are you trying to have your beautiful book published in other countries, and if so, which ones? L'Algérie, for instance.
Je te laisse traduire. Ah non, c'est en anglais. Non, ça, c'est en anglais, oui. Ouais, c'est bon. je commence à dérailler. Oui, j'ai compris. Alors, pas encore en arabe.
So not yet in Arabic.
Il a été traduit en allemand, en espagnol, en catalan, en italien.
So it's been translated in in German, Catalan, Spanish, Italian.
Turkish.
Ouais, à venir.
Soon Turkish and Swedish, I believe.
Ouais, et oui, c'est ça. Merci.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask how you've said that you suddenly had to become a representative of a Muslim immigrant community. I just wondered what the reaction has been amongst Muslims in France. How has your novel been received, and has there been any kind of personal criticism?
J'ai pas reçu beaucoup de réactions.
I didn't get that many reactions
du côté de la communauté musulmane.
From the Muslim community as such.
À part des lectrices, des lecteurs qui ont lu le livre et qui se sont sentis représentés, comme je disais tout à l'heure.
Apart from some readers who felt represented and spoke to me and connect with the character.
Mais en dehors de ça, j'ai pas du tout eu de réaction en fait. J'en ai pas.
But actually, apart from the readers, the people who had read the novel, I didn't have any reactions.
Je voulais juste vous demander, qu'est-ce que vous diriez là à la Fatima de 18 ans, si vous pouviez lui donner un petit message pour les années qui viennent, et sinon à toute jeune fille de 18 ans un peu dans la même situation que vous.
I just wanted to ask, what would you say to an 18-year-old Fatima or any young woman possibly in this situation?
C'est une bonne question.
It's a good question.
Je lui dirais que ça va aller.
I would say, be all right.
Qu'il faut du temps.
You'll need time.
De s'accrocher et de bien s'entourer.
Hang on in there and surround yourself with good people.
Et que je l'aime.
And that I love her. Or them. I love them.
Je voudrais juste savoir, donc vous êtes allé dans plusieurs pays pour des entretiens. Est-ce qu'il y a eu une différence dans certains pays, je pense à la France notamment, les polémiques, comment le livre a été accueilli et comment l'entretien s'est passé?
So since the book's been translated in many languages and having done its promotion in different countries, the question is how it was received potentially differently, with some controversy in France or not, different. How was it compared to different countries?
Différemment, très différemment. Par exemple, la discussion de ce soir, moi je suis super contente, quoi. Je suis super
Very
émue.
differently, for example, tonight's discussion, I'm really happy.
Et en fait, je compare à la France parce que après, en fait, c'est médiatiquement qu'en France c'était très difficile. Et je me rends compte que médiatiquement dans les autres pays, c'est déjà autre chose.
And then in relation to France, the media, from a point of view of media, it was very difficult. And I realized that the media is very different in different countries.
Et voilà, je sens très clairement quand on me reconnaît pour mon travail et quand on me reconnaît parce que je suis lesbienne musulmane et...
And I sense very clear differences when I'm recognized for my work, my writing as an author, and when I'm recognized as Muslim lesbian.
Par exemple, en Allemagne, j'ai reçu un prix en Allemagne et le jury a parlé de mon texte et c'était genre la première fois que j'entendais qu'on parlait de mon texte de cette manière-là, de manière littéraire, de manière... Enfin, s'attarder sur la forme, sur les phrases, sur tout. Et c'est sûr que ça change beaucoup de choses.
In Germany, the jury, I won a prize, an award, and the jury would spend time talking about the form of my book, the rhythm, my work, the writing, in a way that they took their time discussing my work in a way I hadn't had before.
Et juste pour finir, et au départ, je me disais que c'était normal qu'on ne parle pas de tout. Je me disais, mais personne ne peut parler de tout un livre. En fait, si, on peut parler de tout un livre comme on l'a fait aujourd'hui.
Initially, I would say it's normal, you can't talk about a whole book, but actually, yes, you can.
On essaye tout le temps, en fait, de se dire, non mais c'est normal, c'est toi qui en fais trop, et du coup, ça devient épuisant à un moment donné, et tu te rends compte que c'est pas du tout normal, en fait.
And you try it all the time to convince yourself that it's normal, that you're just doing too much of it, but actually, no, it's not.
Are there any more questions? How are we doing? Can I ask any more questions? Yeah. I wanted to know how receiving, by the way, congratulations for the multiple prizes that your book has received, very well deserved. How has that made you feel, you know, being recognized for what you've done and the work that you've put out there?
Bah, j'ai senti que... J'ai senti pour la première fois ce que ça faisait de publier un roman, en fait. En France. Enfin, en France. Pas en France, du coup. Mais...
I felt the first time what it was like to publish a novel.
Et la première fois... Enfin, c'est juste que ça faisait déjà 2 ans que j'avais travaillé dessus. Et du coup, pendant plusieurs mois, je me sentais très éloignée de mon roman. Et d'un coup, là, j'étais très émue, en fait, très émue de savoir ce que ça pouvait faire à d'autres, ce que les autres lisaient, interprétaient dans mon roman et ce que j'en avais fait.
Because I'd worked on it, because it had been a couple of years since I'd written it, to then hear what other people had to say about it, that time difference, and to feel what people told me they felt was quite something.
Yeah, that's really nice. I'm really pleased for you, because I think sometimes when you write about yourself, so just for context, I also sometimes write about myself, you know, an article here or there. I haven't written a whole book, but when you get a response for something you've written a few years ago, it's like, I'm so glad that I put that out there, because this lives in its own place, and it's, you know, it's not like a reactionary thing. It's something that exists in its own right. So I'm really pleased that you had that experience, and hopefully more and more people discover this work and it will stay fresh, because, you know, it stays within that time period. And I had, did you understand all of that? Yeah. And I had one last question. I'm just really curious, you know, are there any authors that inspire you? Are you stylistically influenced by anyone?
Annie Ernaux et Marguerite Duras.
Annie Ernaux and Marguerite Duras mainly.
Et je citerai aussi Abdel Attaya.
And I would also say Abdel Attaya.
Je pense que ça m'a beaucoup aidé de lire ces livres pour publier ce roman et pour réussir en fait à partager cette histoire.
It really helped me to read their book and to be able to share, I can share this story.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Those are all the questions that I have. Yeah, I think we shall conclude. Thank you very much.